That's right, folks. On today's review, I'll be looking at the 80s sci-fi animated movie from Japan, Akira. It's based on the volumes-long graphic novel by Katsuhiro Otomo and directed by Katsuhiro Otomo. Well, I guess you can't complain that it didn't stay faithful to the source material because the guy who wrote the original source material directed the movie. But I digress. Some claim that this is the film that made Japanese animation, or anime, more accepted in the West. So let's dive into Akira, or as the purists like to call it, Akira, or as I often call it on Saturday nights, the Tetsuo Kaneda drinking game, where you take a shot when a character awkwardly screams Tetsuo or Kaneda in a loud, awkward, over-the-top fashion.
Tetsuo! 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 Kaneda! Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo! Kaneda! Kani! Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo! Kaneda! 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 Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo! Kaneda! Tetsuo! Tetsuo! Kaneda!
Looks like I'm gonna need a whole case of these. Our movie begins with what appears to be the aftermath of a giant explosion. It takes place in a somewhat futuristic setting built on top of the old destroyed Tokyo. I will give credit to the design of the city, since it seems like a vision of the future from the 80s, but still has a timelessness that can hold up even today. Even the city itself has a life of its own. It's large in scale, but definitely has the dinginess you could see or smell on a decrepit street corner. To add to the dinginess, we have a biker gang led by the brash but otherwise young Kaneda. Now, if you were like me and you walked into this film with little to no frame of reference, you would think that the movie's mostly focused on him. Hell, the poster and DVD cover is him walking up to his bike, giving us the impression that this is some sort of boy and his bike story, when really, as we'll see,
Help me!
it's definitely more than that. So maybe it's a personal gripe I'm picking at, but the advertising for this film is still an annoyance. You'll also notice something about the voice work. If you watch a dubbed version of this film from English, it's quite...
Why, this ain't a hangout for damn street gangs!
Yeah, right. Drink your dog piss?
awkward. I honestly don't mind, though if you really wanted to get the most out of watching this film, it's probably important not to be fixated at the fine print when the film has a lot of visual flair you could be missing out on. So you might want to truck through listening to the badly imitated Brooklyn gangsters. Which shouldn't be an issue anyway since you're watching my review. So Kaneda and his friends are in pursuit of their rivals, when suddenly... Yeah, I bet you didn't think I was kidding when I tackled that disclaimer at the beginning, because this movie can go very, very gory within a second. While I recommend the people that are easily squeamish to hold off on this film, I do think it's used in good taste. Whereas the story justifies the violence going on in this film, much like a Scorsese film, making a scene like Jake LaMotta getting beaten into a bloody pulp, like this poetic allegory of good and evil. So the 10-year-old fan of the Blue Man Group hits one of the members of Kaneda's gang. Though not physically, as we discover he's a part of a military experiment where scientists are trying to tap into the unknown life force that could help humanity progress into something greater. Like Astro Boy. And if you thought this was a strange plug of an iconic anime character, you shouldn't. Mainly because Astro Boy and other early children's animes like Gigantor are referenced in this film. Hell, the boy from Kaneda's gang is named Tetsuo, which is the Japanese version of Astro Boy's name. Now imagine if they got Freddie Highmore to play Tetsuo in the live-action version. That was a reference to the American Astro Boy movie. Because... relevance? This is where the movie begins to shift to Tetsuo's attention, where we slowly see his sanity slip away, further progressing his condition for the worse. The build-up of seeing him go from a normal teenager to a mass-murdering psychopath is handled surprisingly well, especially since we're given a good glimpse at his life throughout the film, seeing all sides of his character. So much so that it makes him one of the more complex characters in the film. He runs the gamut of all emotions that makes us root for him, see him as a monster, and then ultimately pity him at the end. He is easily one of my favorite characters in a movie where the rest of the cast are... okay at best. For example, there's military generals whose role could only be played by Idris Elba if they ever made a live-action remake of this film. He's very established in his role as the militant leader who does what any military person would do. Since the military has a large hand in politics and the funded science experiments in the film, his importance in the film is needed. But despite that, everybody else in the film is not nearly as developed as Tetsuo. other than Kaneda, whose role as the leader is tested as well as his friendship with Tetsuo. Kaneda gets roped into a group of rebels trying to know more about the Akira project, which are part of experiments being done on Tetsuo. One includes Kaneda's love interest, whose romance goes just as well as Pepe Le Pew's, whose role is vital in that, well, she's the only one actually fighting for a cause. It turns out that the crew is being set up by the government trying to undermine the authority of the military, who are also in control of the science experiments, including the Akira project, which includes the increasingly powerful Tetsuo. You see, this is one of the big criticisms this film gets, part of which comes from the fact that every detail in the plot is just as elaborate enough for a 2-hour movie, despite coming out from a graphic novel about 8 volumes long. Again, you can't blame Otomo, since he's the one who wrote the book. But when transitioning page to film, there are a lot of things that could have been elaborated on more. For example, when Tetsuo breaks out and goes back to his normal meeting spot, he asks for pills. It seems kind of random since pills aren't mentioned anywhere before or after this film, but the pills play an important role in the story. Now they're just mentioned because they look cool on the back of Kaneda's jacket. Whatever the case may be, Akira is awesome. It's one of the great animes, if not one of the great animated movies of all time. It's still relevant even for today. Producers still want to make a remake of Akira, but struggle to find a way to adapting it for today's standards. One of which is making it live action and set in America. One of these things bother me, while the other, just a little. If they did set the film in America, I don't think it would be such an issue, especially since a lot of what Akira's appeal is probably more American than you think. Hence why it comes to no surprise that the West has taken such an acclaim towards the film. Otomo has stated in interviews that his influences come from Western culture, mostly dealing with the lone wolves, anarchists, or rebels. Even in Akira, there are themes of capitalism and the environment that Americans can relate to. Hell, some of those who have made a convincing argument that the film Chronicle, where an American boy very similar to Tetsuo's struggle, was a loose but decent take on the basic story of Akira. However, it would probably reap more benefits if they did keep it in Japan. I still think there are things like the psychic bomb, or whatever Tetsuo transforms into, are more understood for a Japanese context. That, in making it live action, takes away from the appeal of it being animated. To put this in perspective on how well animated this film is, Disney animators documented that it would take one of their traditionally animated films to be composed of 120,000 animated frames. How many frames was Akira composed of? 160,000, beating out the traditionally animated Disney film by 40,000 frames. Take into account the frames that move in the background, the effects, and for the most part the detail in making characters more alive than your typical Japanese film. But that's the thing, Akira is anything but typical. It's among my favorite animated films, right up there in my top 10. While the plot does feel hard to follow, the general story is compelling, its characters interesting, and the way it comes together is epic in scale. If I were you, I'd make sure I'd see the Blu-ray version on a large TV screen, which was released to commemorate its 25th anniversary, which I think is a must for animation fans both East and West. So what else can I say about the film other than that it is worth it? So my question for today is, what is your favorite anime movie? Comment and let me know. And you know what? Eventually I might review some more animes, maybe even finally review a Studio Ghibli film. It's been like forever, right? I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P, and thanks for watching this review on the Cartoon Palooza.